Today we are here at the Australian Institute of International Affairs 2018 National Conference. My name is Tommy, and here we have Professor Rory Medcalf, the head of National Security College at the Australian National University. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Could you please start off with some of your key points regarding the panel discussion on strengthening Australia's security?
So we had a really, exciting discussion about the security challenges that Australia faces, particularly in the regional context, in the Indo-Pacific. A big focus on China, but not exclusively on China. And I tried to, start with the key point that not only is our security environment changing rapidly, and frankly it is getting worse, it's deteriorating, but also that it's become more complex. So the boundary between what is domestic security and what is international security on issues like cyber or terrorism or foreign interference or protection of critical infrastructure or energy. There's so many issues. These issues now cross the border. They're not just exclusively international or domestic, and that makes it much more necessary for us to have a whole of nation and a whole of government response.
So in regards to recent discourse regarding China's sharp power in the region, how do you think Australia could better strategize in a kind of whole of government approach against these kind of new forms of influence in the region?
So sharp power, of course, referring to the foreign influence and interference debate, and that term has become quite popular alongside hard and soft power. Look, I think Australia has actually taken an international lead on this issue. There are those who say Australia isn't activist enough in the world. Well, actually, on the sharp power issue, Australia's been very activist. And it may be because the challenge was identified first in Australia, and Australia recognised it had vulnerabilities, Australia has shown some leadership. So there are really a few things that have to happen now, going forward. One is that now that Australia has some quite substantial new laws, the foreign influence and interference laws, supported by both sides of politics, we now need to move to ensure that there's a sense of inclusiveness in the Australian community, that these laws are not targeted at any particular migrant or ethnic community. These laws are for the protection of all Australians from any foreign power that seeks to exert undue influence. And at the same time, Australia needs to, work with others internationally, with like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific, in the region, but also globally, particularly with the European powers, to build, international coalitions that work to protect democratic institutions, whether it's from the Chinese Communist Party or from Russia or other potential actors that might seek to disrupt democracy.
Moving on to US-China relations, so there has been recent tensions between US and China regarding a show of force in the South China Sea. And Australia was being involved in this area where the US kind of urged Australia to support its operations against China in the South China Sea. So do you think this is an increasing sign of US trying to expect Australia to commit more to its alliance interests? And how can Australia manage this expectation gap between US and Australia?
Between US and China, I take it.
Oh,
yes, yeah. So look, I think we shouldn't focus only on the South China Sea on these issues, in my opinion. I think that there's often press reporting saying that the US is pushing Australia to do freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. In my view, Australia should reserve the right to conduct freedom of navigation operations, to really assert and uphold international law and the rights of international maritime forces, and of course commercial shipping as well, to travel freely under international law with respect to sovereignty. But Australia is already doing other things. Australia has a very established regime of maritime surveillance flights over the South China Sea, over the international waters of the South China Sea, and Australia will keep those going. But Australia can find other ways that it can work with not only the US alliance, but with other countries in the Indo-Pacific, with Indonesia, India, Japan, all sorts of countries, to really develop a situation where there is more respect for the rights and interests of all countries, and where China has to realise that it's rising in a region where it's not the only power.
Could you just discuss a little bit about how the rise of emerging regional powers would move Australia closer to Indonesia as a closer comprehensive strategic partnership?
So I'm a strong advocate of the view that Australia needs a closer relationship with Indonesia that is comprehensive. It's not only economic or diplomatic, but includes security, defence, intelligence, the whole lot. In fact, we've seen a lot of convergence of interests of the two countries. I was involved in the Australian Defence White Paper in 2016, and we very, very clearly did not portray Indonesia as a threat or a risk, but in fact emphasised that a strong Indonesia is good for Australia. So I think in this new regional environment where there is uncertainty, where there is Chinese power, where there are question marks about the reliability of the United States as well, the middle players do need to form coalitions, we do need to step up, and I'm quite heartened by the fact that Indonesia has become a very strong advocate this year of the Indo-Pacific idea, because that positions Indonesia as a leader and a central player in the action. So I see a lot of scope and a lot of reality in the Australia-Indonesia security relationships in the years ahead.
All right. Once again, thank you very much for joining us for the interview.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
So if you'd like to hear more about our interviews, please visit our website internationalaffairs.org.au or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.